I couldn't believe it when I saw his friend request on Facebook. It had been over 20 years since I'd seen or spoken to him. My heart raced as memories of our teenage romance flooded back. We had been inseparable in high school, but life took us in different directions after graduation. Curiosity got the better of me, and I accepted his friend request. Within minutes, I received a private message from him. We exchanged the usual pleasantries about how time had flown by and how much things had changed since we were last together. We began messaging each other regularly, catching up on 2 decades worth of life events. He told me he was divorced and living in another state now. I told him that I was happily married with 2 children, but failed to mention that my marriage wasn't as happy as it appeared. As our conversations continued, they grew more intimate, both emotionally and sexually. We shared our hopes and dreams for the future, as well as our darkest fantasies. It felt good to have someone listen to me and show genuine interest in what I had to say. Over time, the messages became more flirtatious, filled with sexual tension that was impossible to ignore. He made me feel sexy and desired in a way that my husband hadn't in years. One night while messaging each other, he confessed that he still loved me after all these years. My heart skipped a beat as emotions overwhelmed me. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about love was turned upside down. Our conversation turned intense and passionate as we admitted that we still longed for each other physically and emotionally. We talked about what it would be like if we were together now. Our words painted vivid pictures of stolen kisses, lingering touches, and sweaty bodies entwined in passion. I wanted him more than I had ever wanted anyone before. My body ached with desire for this man who once held my heart in his hands. I needed to feel him, taste him, and be with him. It wasn't long before we decided to make plans for a secret rendezvous. He would fly in for a weekend and stay at a hotel close by so we could spend our days exploring each other's bodies and our nights lost in each other's souls. The anticipation was unbearable as the days until our reunion ticked away. My mind was consumed with thoughts of him. I could barely function as I counted down the minutes until I would be back in his arms once again. When the day finally arrived, I nervously drove to the hotel where he was waiting for me. My heart pounded against my chest as I knocked on the door to his room. Time stood still as the door slowly opened, and there he stood, just as handsome as ever. Without saying a word, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me passionately. The years melted away as we explored each other's mouths, like we were teenagers again. His hands roamed freely over my body, reacquainting themselves with every curve and contour. He gently pushed me backward toward the bed until my legs hit the edge and I fell back onto it. He climbed on top of me, continuing to kiss me feverishly while simultaneously pulling at my clothing until it lay in a heap on the floor. I lay there completely exposed to him, both physically and emotionally. His eyes devoured every inch of my body as he whispered words of adoration that caused shivers to run up and down my spine. His mouth traced a path from my lips down over my chest and stomach, running down my complete body. He peppered a trail of kisses across my stomach and further down, his warm breath sending waves of anticipation through me. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with hunger and need, before he continued to dance skillfully over my body as I moaned in ecstasy. I tangled my fingers in his hair and pulled him closer, urging him to devour me completely. The intensity of the sensations was overwhelming as he brought me closer to the edge with each passing second. I felt the familiar coil of pleasure building within me as I bucked against his mouth, unable to control the primal urges coursing through my body. He held me firmly in place, using his free hand to keep me right where he wanted me. The pressure continued to mount until finally, I shattered into a million pieces. My emotions crashed over me like a tidal wave, leaving me breathless and trembling beneath him. He kissed his way back up my body until our lips met once again. I could taste myself on him as our tongues intertwined in a passionate dance that only served to ignite the fire between us even more. I looked into his eyes as I positioned myself over him. We both gasped at the feeling of our bodies joining together, as if we were two puzzle pieces finally finding their perfect fit. The room was filled with the sounds of our bodies in contact, along with the sweet melody of our moans and sighs. He reached up and held my face firm but gently in his hand. The added sensation sent shockwaves of pleasure through me, intensifying the connection we shared. I leaned back slightly, giving him full access to my neck. He nipped and kissed his way along my collarbone until he found that one spot that drove me wild. He sucked hard, leaving a mark that would serve as a reminder of this moment for days to come. The pressure built steadily until it became too much to bear. I was the one in control, and now I was sending him through unknown and overwhelming ecstasies. We collapsed onto the bed in a tangled mess of limbs and sweaty skin. Our hearts pounded in unison as we basked in the afterglow of what can only be described as pure bliss. For those few precious minutes, nothing else mattered except for us. We had managed to recapture that magic from so long ago and turn it into something even more powerful than before. As we lay there catching our breaths, I couldn't help but wonder how two people who were so clearly meant to be together ended up on such different paths in life. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the undeniable fact that we were exactly where we were supposed to be, wrapped in each other's arms and burning with a desire that had never truly gone away. We still had another day and night together, and I planned to make every second count. The realization of what was happening finally hit me like a freight train. I pushed him off of me and quickly got off the bed. My hands were shaking as I struggled to put my clothes back on. "What's wrong?" he asked, his face filled with confusion and hurt. "What's wrong? Are you kidding me right now? This should have never happened." I snapped at him. "I thought you wanted this," he said softly, his eyes downcast. "You thought I wanted this? Well, you thought wrong. How could you be so stupid? We knew this was a bad idea from the start." I yelled at him. Tears were streaming down my face as I continued to lash out at him. The weight of what we had just done was crushing me from all sides, and there was no way to escape it. "You don't mean that," he said quietly. "Don't tell me what I mean or don't mean. You have no clue how much damage you've caused by doing this." He reached out for me, but I slapped his hand away before he could touch me. The look on his face shattered my heart into a million tiny pieces, but there was no going back now. "I think it's best if you leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "Yes, I'm sure. Just go." He stood up from the bed and started getting dressed in silence. The tension in the room was suffocating as neither of us dared to speak or make eye contact. Once he was fully dressed, he walked over to me and gently cupped my face in his hands. I tried to pull away, but he held on tight, refusing to let me go. "I'm so sorry," he said softly, tears welling up in his eyes. "Sorry isn't going to fix this. We can never undo what's been done," I said, my voice filled with resignation. He leaned in and kissed me one last time, a bittersweet goodbye filled with all the love and longing we could never act upon again. Then, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the wake of our shattered dreams. Only afterwards I realized how selfish I have been. Of course it wasn't his fault, at least not alone. I was me as well, leaning into this adventure, because I couldn't handle how life has become between me and my husband. But the shame that just kicked in sent my emotions on a roller coaster. So in the end, not only did I betray my husband and need to find a way to either fix this relationship or bring it to an end. Additionally, I was overstrained by the situation, that I pushed away another person having only warm-hearted feelings for me. I felt like a curse was hanging over me, but I brought myself in this situation, so it's also me who needs to find a way out of it.